There's quite a sentiment out there that having women underrepresented in tech is a bad thing. Do you see it as necessarily a negative, or is it just a fact of life?
No, I don't see it as a negative, because I think in general guys will be more attractive to this kind of jobs than women, and maybe even for majority be more fit for it. But what I do think is that we need to make sure that the women have the same opportunities, so that the women that do want to do this job, that they can do it. But I think if we would look at the population, that we always will have more men, and if you're going to force it any way other, I think it's just going to be problems, because a lot of women, I think, are not suited for this type of job. Just as well that I'm not suited for a job in a hospital.
There are a few companies out there, or organizations at least, that think that, not that it's a problem, but they are at least trying to actively get more women into tech.
I think that there should be money invested in some point, but I don't think they should strive for like equality, because like I said before, I don't think equality would be ideal. I'm also very opposed to where a lot of women say there should be equal women and men in every education and everywhere in the world. I don't believe in that, because I think there are main differences between men and women. The brain works a little bit differently. But what I do think we need is that women get the same chances, but also get people into the industry in a different way, which makes it more appealing to women. I think we need to invest in that. So getting more women is fine, but not trying to get certain numbers of women, because I don't think that's realistic and also not ideal for the industry or for the women itself.
I mean, I know there's not a direct equivalence here, but you wouldn't want to see an initiative to get more men into nursing or education. Is that...
Well, my mom works in education, and I know she is always saying about we need more guys there as well. Yeah. But in the same manner as what I'm saying about women in tech, we need more women, I think, but not inequality, because I think that's never going to happen. It's not realistic and not ideal. We need to make sure that the opportunities are big enough for women, and that there's equality in the opportunities and in the way we think about it, and not literally in the amount of women in tech.
Is there anything that you could think of that would need to happen to remove barriers or to increase the participation? Anything that would have helped you?
I think the general way of thinking about it. So it's okay to think about there's more guys in tech than that are girls. But at least when I was younger, when I said that I want to do something more technical, people just looked at me weirdly, like, "What? You're a woman? What you gonna do there?"
Who? Friends?
Friends, my parents. In high school, I did some testing, like to see what profession would fit you. Like one of the things was a car technician, which was, I thought, really interesting. But my father just laughed at me. Of course, I didn't go that way, but sort of those types of experiences do
have an influence.
Yeah, they influence you, and you think more like tech stuff is not for me. Well, I think if you look at me for growing up, it's always been clear that I've been more interested in tech stuff. So I think that way of thinking and that way of encouraging should be different. And if that's the case, then I think the women that are suited for these type of jobs will eventually get there.
I actually read an article about women pilots, and they're also underrepresented. I think it's something like, I don't know if I read 5 or 8%. And they were asking what are the reasons why there aren't more female pilots. There could be dozens of reasons, but one of them was that the primary relationship that a pilot has is with a piece of machinery. And I thought that's probably the same in software, right? It's your computer, that's your main thing. And women are, if you read the studies, they're more people-focused. Men are more focused on things.
I think that's partly true indeed. I think I've always known that stereotype didn't apply to me, because I was a young girl. I was more attracted in doing boy stuff, because I wasn't playing with dolls. I was trying to climb in trees and stuff like that.
Yeah. But then do you think it's necessary to be of, I don't want to say a more boyish type, but let's take the stereotypical boy. Then is it necessary to be that way? Otherwise you wouldn't be interested in the industry.
No, I don't think so. when I started in IT, I did a traineeship, and there were quite a lot of women, actually. We were a group of, I think, 9. I think more than half was female. Not all of them were more boyish type, but there are certain personality features you kind of need. So the boyish types might not be the right way of saying it, but there are certain qualities you need, I think.
Because you said this is more, maybe it's an industry more suited for men. Does it ever go through your mind then that I'm not good enough?
No. I've always thought I'm good enough to do this. I might even be at some levels be better than some of the guys. The real technical stuff, if I look at my current team, there are guys that are better in the pure technical stuff. Because I also don't have a large background in tech. But there are also parts where I think I am better, and that's mostly the more analytical part. So analyzing the problem, and also when there's a bug, really thinking about the problems and solving it. I've always been experienced that I'm better at. And I also think there are other qualities that are more generally seen in women that can actually be very helpful in tech. Like memory. Women tend to remember everything. It's probably something that comes up in a lot of relationships as well.
Yeah, it's just not always a good
that the woman says, you forgot something again. But that's something I experience in my team as well very often. That all the guys, they said, I don't know anymore. That's about 3 weeks ago. And then they come to me, and then I still remember.
That's true. Yeah.
That's because of course I should mention Jesse's in your team, so
yes,
he's
he
guilty
knows.
of that.
No, I can vouch for that.
It's probably like a misconception in the industry again that everything we do is highly technical and nerdy.
No,
that's just not the case.
Most things we do is not very complex. You can just learn it or Google it or find some solution for it.
Yeah, it's definitely not as technical as the average job listing would suggest, which is
which
you
is
have expert level knowledge in 12 programming languages and a bunch of other stuff.
It's something I'm always complaining about. You look at any programmer job, it's 95% tech, and then there's a little bit at the bottom that says, you need to be a team player and have a few skills. But I would make that 50-50 at a minimum. And I'd even be tempted to say, if your tech skills are just average, that's good enough, because we value other things more.
It's more the analytical parts and the social skills that are really important.
And have you ever seen that to be lacking in teams that you've been in the past?
Yes. I've had a couple of colleagues who really lack that. I had one senior colleague at my last company, and he always tried to explain everything from tech experience, and even that wasn't very good in him. But we got a lot of bugs there, and I always try to approach it analytically. So let's say, okay, this is what happened, and it either has to come from that or that and that. And he was always saying, no, that can't be it, because that's programmed very well. And I think you never know. If you write code, you never know what happens.
You have to verify everything.
Yes, you don't assume things are working perfectly. And we always had discussions about it, and in the end, quite often, I was right.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the qualities which, if you want to be a woman in tech, you need to have a little bit. Indeed, you shouldn't be too passive, because otherwise the guys will just run over you. So you need to have a little bit of assertiveness.
Do you ever find yourself having to become more like that, and more than you want to be, even?
Yeah, I do sometimes, but it's mainly in the online meetings where I struggle a lot, because I'm the type of person who likes to let people talk and then say something. But with online meetings and it's just...
Yeah, and then you have all the additional drawbacks from online, where you can't read facial cues and that sort of stuff. You don't know when somebody is about to stop talking, and it makes it difficult.
And they speak a lot louder, so even if I try to say something, then they don't hear me. I think my colleagues notice as well that if they meet me in real time, that I'm a lot more present than when it's online meetings, because I find it easier to talk to them if it's...
One of your colleagues told me that. Yeah. Because you've only just started, all of you, your team, meeting every 3 weeks just to get a bit more face time. And I think one of them said that
I was present.
Yeah, much more present.
Yeah, we talked about that because we did a sort of feedback session, and I think all of the guys told me that. And it's true, yeah. In my former company, we did a lot of pair programming or mob programming. So we did a lot of, with someone else, programming with someone else. And there, you don't need to have a huge amount of knowledge about the tech, because with the two of you can figure it out, but you do need a lot of social skills. You need to be able to communicate with each other, because usually what we do, there was one guy typing, who's actually doing coding, but the other one was telling him what to code. So you need to be able to do that, because not a lot of people can tell someone in a good way how to code. Because one of the colleagues I'm working with now sometimes struggles with that as well. Then he tells me something, but not what I want to hear, to be able to actually type it in. Yeah. So that's a skill you need as well, and that's not easy to get.
Yeah, you need the social proficiency to make that work.
And even the way you say it. I mean, the way you're communicating in those situations.
It's really important.
Matters.
Yeah.
I don't want to get annoyed when somebody asks me to do something. I won't do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear exactly technical what you need to type, but more like save something to the database instead of actually saying what you need to type in, because that's way easier, and also you think about it more.
You don't want somebody to say, open your left bracket, then type the B, then the L, or whatever. That doesn't work.
No. During the time of Corona, we still pair programmed or mob programmed. But actually, it was sometimes better than in person, because you could just share your screen, and we had a program which we could take over each other's screen. So if you want to switch, then just someone else was still typing, but it's on the other's computer, for instance. When we did mob, we actually had a tool, Mobster, which made us switch every time. So the keyboard was switched between people. So there was always one person typing, one person being the driver. So he was telling what to do, and the other guy was like the observer, so correcting, or sometimes telling the driver to say something else because there was something incorrect. And then you switched every 20 minutes.
Was that useful to have that structure?
Yeah, I really liked it that way. What we did have is that the guy typing is not the guy thinking. And I think it's sometimes hard to combine as well, especially for men who can't do two things at the same time.
You can say that. That's all right.
I think it's good to move around the keyboard, because then you have some time to think about in between as well. Because if you're typing all the time, then you're not really thinking that much anymore.
Yeah, and the point from earlier still stands. Like you're not in a purely technical position right now. You're mostly in a social situation, and that's. There's actually another specific thing I want to ask you about. If I look at myself and also a lot of the applicants that we've spoken to, a lot of them came into this field because of their love for video games, and they wanted to be game developers and all that sort of stuff. Did you have a love for video games or anything like that? Or
I hate video games.
You hate it?
Yeah, that's the one big difference I noticed between me and a lot of colleagues I had. Almost every one of them loves video games, or had played them in the past. I always hated them. I was forced to play them with my brother sometimes, but so no. That's something I really can't. If my colleagues start talking about video games, I just zone out.
Yeah.
What are you doing then in your childhood?
Usually I was just playing sports. I was outside, active, playing sports or watching sports. Still, I do that in my free time. And that's also something I noticed when I switched from sports data to tech. I mentioned Shinky Knecht. It's a Dutch short track skater. And there was a guy who had no idea who he was. And I was thinking, oh my God, what sort of world did I end up in? Where no one knows who Shinky Knecht is.
Yeah, the sports and tech don't mix that well. I like sports, and I barely have a discussion about that. Yeah. So you're not alone. I don't think that's a male-female thing necessarily.
No. I've experienced a couple of colleagues who like sports as well, but in general, tech guys just
doesn't really mix.
No.
The reason I brought it up is because I think there is a decent influx of game developers into this industry, but if for whatever reason games just aren't as interesting to women, that might contribute to those numbers.
Yeah, I think so too, indeed. Yeah.
The tradition is to hire from universities where the students have studied science and maths, those kind of hard engineering type degrees, which again women don't tend to go into as much.
Looking at education for some part, I think makes sense, because if people choose their education correctly, it tends to say something about what they're interested in. Because for instance, when I started looking for studies, I also looked at the more social study, and I went to like an open day for that, and within 10 minutes I knew this is nothing for me. And that is because that type of thinking was not for me. And I think the type of thinking you learn at a study is interesting, but I think we should widen the race. Yeah. So like the real social studies, you might not find a lot of people you can place easily in tech, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of stuff in between in the gray area, which I think you can pull a lot of good tech guys from.
Mm. Well, speaking of younger generations, if there are women thinking about coming into this industry, what would you say?
I would definitely recommend it, because if you want to, there's enough possibilities, and I really like my job, so I would go for it. What I would recommend is just, if you want to do it, just do it. And don't let anyone tell you can't do it, or you're not good enough, or anything. If you want to and you think you're good enough, just go for it.
Nice. All right. That's a good way to end it then. Thanks for coming on, Renske.
Yes, no problem.